Hey everyone, Greg here presenting solo as Mark is on vacation. Today, I'm going to briefly go over model portfolio performance before moving on to discussing what's happening in markets, what I'm concerned about regarding Trump, as well as what may happen with Carney as our PM. So let's get started. Big jump in performance. At one point, mid-April, about 15, 16 days ago, the very conservative model was down 1.5% year to date, and the aggressive model was down as much as 12%, the aggressive model being 100% stocks. We've rebounded sharply over the past 2 to 3 weeks, entirely on the market's hope that we are going to have a quick resolution to the madness that Trump is causing. Keep in mind, because Trump blinked and put a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, markets are always forward-looking 6 to 12 months. They now think there's a pretty good chance that this is all going to be resolved by then. Hence, the rebound we're seeing. And of course, the Trump, global trade war, it continues to dominate the headlines. You see it in the news every single day. One thing about the potential recession ahead and why I actually think there more than likely is going to be a recession, even though it's around 50-50 right now, is that it's known as an event-driven recession. Event-driven recessions are usually shorter in nature. And the last event-driven recession that we had was the COVID recession. According to Goldman Sachs, event-driven recessions are short. They're usually about 6 months, so that's 2 quarters, and markets fully recover within around 9, and within 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 more months after that, so 12 months total, we're usually making new highs. However, event-driven recessions can lead to systemic recessions, like the 2008 global financial crisis. Those are usually, and as I said in my previous video with Mark, those are usually 2 to 3 year recessions. It's a longer recovery. That's the biggest fear I have right now. And quite frankly, the market isn't pricing that in because, again, it's forward looking 6 to 12 months. But there's a plethora of negative data that is starting to hit us and is going to be hitting us over the month of May. Here's my fear, though. Trump pushed the tariffs back 90 days. He's been claiming that countries are all lining up to make deals. I really don't think that's true. That's because leaders around the world, they're not stupid. Rather than let themselves be extorted by a bad deal, and I'll say it, this con man, they're taking a more cautious approach while his numbers plummet. Here's a slide showing what Americans think of Trump's economic policy, and it's pretty bad. The main thing to note is that in November last year, when he was first elected, his economic approval, it was over 50%. It's now currently sitting, if you look at the orangish line, it's now currently sitting at 36%. And that consists almost entirely of Republicans. This was the main thing he was elected on. And go to the next slide. And when it comes to his overall approval, his numbers keep getting worse and worse. That's why countries aren't really rushing to make a deal. They know that the longer this goes on, the more Trump's approval falls, the more likely there is to be revolt. I took this slide from the polling aggregator, Real Clear Politics. I've also heard, political commentators state that if his approval dips down to the high 30s, it's a very high likelihood that in the midterms that are coming up in about a year and a half, that Republicans get completely wiped out. Now, if he dips to the mid 30s or low 30s, then he's going to be impeached. So if they just sit back and bide their time, then they can watch the fireworks unfold. At likely some point, there are going to be Republicans and judges that are going to be stopping him. And of course, from an optic standpoint, the next potential shoe to drop is goods shortages. Waging a trade war against the entire world at the same time. Obviously, the US's largest trade partner, aside from Canada, is China, and all the other Asian countries where they manufacture all their goods and Americans import them, they buy them. Well, we can see that at least on this graph or this chart here, you can see what's going on between the United States and China and the amount of sailing and container ships that are coming over from China. Well, we did see a big uptick in March and beginning of April, but it has completely fallen off over the rest of the course of the month of April. And what that's likely to do is lead to goods shortages 4, 8, 12 weeks down the road. So no one is seeing it yet, but we're hearing from the CEOs of Walmart, Target, when they do their earnings, they can't give any guidance. And they're also warning that their earnings is going to be impacted because they're not going to have things to sell. So the longer this goes on, the more the heat continues to ratchet up on Trump. And so that's why I think there's a chance that the market is correct and that it is going to be something that's short-lived in that 6 to 12 months. This is all behind us. But if it isn't, I worry that we do enter into the systemic recession. And for Canadians, what does this shortage of goods in the US mean? Well, it just means that we're going to see more things like smuggling. Um, One of the political commentators who is a dual citizen, he's both Canadian and American, his name's David Frum. He was an advisor and speechwriter for George Bush. He's someone who I follow and get insights from on these topics. He said one of the things that happens when there are trade embargoes, which is essentially what's happening right now. U.S. is putting a trade embargo on China and quite a few other countries around the world, is that you see from neighboring countries a large increase in things like smuggling. What does that mean? It means that, Americans are going to start bringing over the goods that we don't have tariffs on for themselves, and that leads to inflation, which is not good for anybody's portfolio. It impacts negatively stocks. It also impacts negatively bonds. So our very conservative and our conservative moderate models, which are 40, 60, 70, 80% bonds, they could also get whacked as well. What about our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney? Well, the Liberal leader just won a strong minority. One thing for anyone who is concerned, who is a conservative supporter about Liberals being in power again, I say don't worry. He's a centrist. If far-right leader Pierre Poilievre wasn't leading the Conservative Party, there's a good chance Mark would be in power right now. He's a conservative politician. I mean, he was brought in under Harper, and there's a good chance he would have been the party head. So for all the conservatives who are upset and perhaps freaking out right now, I say don't. I really think that his approach, he's doing the right thing already in the month that he's been prime minister. The approach that he's taking, I think it's the right one. And that's just kind of waiting and seeing, not jumping to make a deal. I think that's the right approach. And I think sometime in the month of May, he is set to meet with President Trump, which is always a good thing as well. But I don't expect there to be any big trade agreement or any announcement, nor for him to quote unquote, bend the knee, as some people on the right are saying. That's likely not to happen. So what should we look out for? Well, over the next 48 weeks, we're going to see if this recovery that we've experienced, if it's a sustained recovery. And, these trade deals, if there are any trade deals, I don't think there are any, but if there are any, if they start to roll in, we're probably going to recover back to the market highs that we've seen in very short order. But if not, if this is all just BS and there are no trade deals happening, and Trump's approval continues to fall and 90 days hits on this pause and then the tariffs come back, well, we are very likely going to retest those lows. And I just want everyone to kind of brace themselves for some negative volatility. Again, we have no idea what's going to happen. No one really does. We've never been in this situation before. But if you feel uneasy about the volatility or what's going on in the markets, please reach out to myself or Mark or the team. We're always happy to have a meeting and for me to have a conversation with you. Thanks so much for listening to our update. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to presenting our next update at the end of the month of May. Thank you.